So if you look at this list here, you'll be able to see what our options are for different types of use of Maya. So I would recommend, if you're new to Maya, use Modeling Standard. Watch what happens when I select that workspace. Now it gives me an outliner view here, which I can always hide by clicking that tab. You see it's over here nested into the strip, and if I want to see the outliner again, I can just click that, or I can click my outliner button over here to the left. The modeling toolkit's over here, and then these other tabs are sort of nested behind the modeling toolkit over here. If I want that to go away, I can click the tab, and now you see them nested neatly over to the side here. So at any time, I can just kind of maximize my screen real estate to be able to focus on what I want to see. Now in this modeling standard workspace, you notice we still have this command line, the Mel script editor. We can pull that out and just close it. Or you could go up to where we found those UI elements and uncheck it. But by closing it, I've essentially unchecked it. You'll find in Maya there's usually more than one way of doing the same thing. If there's an icon, it's probably also hidden in the menu somewhere. Or if there's a graphical way to do something, it's probably also sort of like a text command way of doing it. When we get to UV editing, you'll see that there's also a workspace for that that shows you the UV editor. But I'm going to go ahead and go back to modeling standard, and this is how I had it set up. As we look across the Maya user interface, we see a lot of things that you might not recognize. So we're going to start to go through some of those. Don't panic if we skip something, we don't have time to look at them all, but I want to draw your attention to a few things. This top row, this is our drop-down menus, and you can click on any of those and see what comes down below it. So you start to get familiar with what's hidden in each of these menus, okay? And those often have submenus, or often they have a command box that you can click on. If you go to that little rectangle icon to the right, it'll show you the tool options or more information for that tool, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and close those. This next line is this status bar. We also have some contextual drop-down options here for modeling, rigging, animation, effects, rendering, and so forth. But we're just going to keep that on modeling. In this shelf, we have multiple tabs also. We have curves, surfaces, polymodeling, sculpting, UV editing, rigging, that's preparing a model to animate, animation, obviously know what that is, rendering, effects, that kind of thing. So I like to keep this on polymodeling while we're working. Let's look at the toolbox here over to the left. What you see in the polymodeling shelf here at first is a list of these primitives, things like spheres, cubes, cylinders, cones. And just by clicking one of those, I can create a torus. This is like the donut. We also have planes. It just gives you a flat plane of geometry. This is called a polygon disk. Each of these can be configured using the attribute editor. There's usually a tab here when you create something that allows you to pick additional or different attributes for the way that that primitive object gets subdivided with geometry. And all the primitive objects are like that. You can adjust the radius of the torus here, the section radius, and then you have subdivisions, right? How many subdivisions do you need around that torus? And the more you have, the smoother it's going to look. Okay, another object we have in the polygon primitives menu is a platonic solid. Now this is a kind of geometry that has a certain number of sides which you can adjust under this dropdown, where you can determine what kind of primitive exactly you're creating. A tetrahedron, a cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, or an icosahedron. If we increase the subdivisions, you can see how that subdivides and becomes a sphere. The radius is just going to scale it up. How big is it? And the spherical inflation, where you can adjust just how much curvature it has. So these are pretty cool, what can be done with platonic solids if you need a more complex starting primitive object. Sometimes I just like to play with these and see what kinds of shapes I can create.